Hello and good morning. CTS265 Section 840 students for the Fall 2015 semester at Anne Arundel Community College. This is the CCNP route course, and this morning's video tutorial is going to be on Discovery Activity 10, where we're going to take a deep dive into building the LSDB, or the Link State Database. And I can assure you that this is one of the critical topics and critical concepts that you need to master in order to fully understand and be able to fully troubleshoot, implement, and configure OSPF. So let's go ahead and dig in here. It's going to have a start out on router 4, which is here in area 0. So you can see we have our backbone area here. So we're going to start on router 4. There we go. Router 4 is back. It died out on us last lab, but it is back. So we'll go from user exec to privilege exec. We'll say show IP route. So you can see that we now have a new type of route in the Link State Database here. We have or in our routing table actually, we have this OE2, right, which stands for external type 2. And here it is right here up in our legend, right? It's an OSPF external type 2 route. Now we've seen the inter-area routes with the OIA, and we're familiar with the intra-area routes, which are just the O by themselves right there. All right, so we're familiar with that already. Let's go ahead and drive on here. We're going to take a look at the OSPF database. So if I say show IP OSPF database, we're going to now take a look at the LSAs that we've received from the perspective of router 4. So again, router 4 is only in which area? Well, it's only in area 0. So everything that it's reporting back to us is what it's seen from the perspective of area 0. So now this is the link state ID for the type 1 LSA, and that is the router. I'll write that over here. So this is the router LSA. This is the network LSA. Here is our summary LSA, and then we've got down the ASBR summary, and this is telling us how to get to the ASBR router, and then we have our external LSA, which is this new, our type 5, right? So this is going to be the type 1. Here is our type 2 LSA. Here's our type 3 LSA. Here's the type 4 LSA. And finally, here's my type 5 LSA. Now, the key thing to get down here is the link state ID, right? The identifier here in the link state database. So for a type 1 LSA, it is the router ID, right? For the type 2, it's the IP address of the DR router on our segment. For the type 3, we get the network information, right? And for the type 4, we get the router ID of the ASBR, and we learn that this is the router ID of the router that we need to recurse to get to this node in the graph, who can then get me to the ASBR. And then we have the type 5, which is similar to the type 3 in the sense that we get the network is the link state identifier. However, we get the advertising router as 3.3.3.3. So again, the ASBR, and so you can see here, right, the link ID of the ASBR is 3.3.3.3. We need to recurse to 1.1.1.1 to get to the ASBR, and then there's no coincidence here that this type 5 external LSA link state ID, the network 10.0.0.0.0, was originally advertised by the router with the router ID 3.3.3.3. So let's clear the screen here. Let's go back to our diagram and let's take a look at that. So from the perspective of the diagram, right, who is the ASBR? Well, it's this guy right here because he has the external domain, right? So he is the autonomous system boundary router, and he is an ASBR in area 2. So what's going to happen is he is going to generate a type 5 LSA for that network right there, the 10.0.0.0. He's going to send that in as a type 5. It's going to hit the ABR. Now, remember what we said before. So like the loopback address here in area 1 for router 2. There's going to be type 1s and type 2s, and we're going to see some nice diagrams of this. Those are going to hit the ABR. Those, the type 1s and 2s, these go out as type 3s. However, the type 5, right? What is the domain scope of the type 5? It is domain wide, which means when it hits this ABR as a type 5, so this guy comes in here as a type 5, he is going to come out of there as a type 5. So he's going to come into area 0 as a type 5. He's going to go over to area 1 as a type 5 because the type 5s have domain-wide scope. Need to make sure I'm clear on that. The type 5 LSA will get flooded throughout the entire, and when I say the entire domain, I'm not talking about the area. This is my OSPF domain. The domain is composed, or what does it equal? It equals all OSPF areas, right? So that is what the OSPF domain is. That is different from the OSPF area, right? Because we have all these individual areas, and so it's the sum of all of my areas that make up my OSPF domain. So these type 5s, when we get a type 5, he has domain-wide scope, which means he is going to find his way into every single area. Now, I should clarify, into every single area in the context that we have no stub areas, right? We have no totally stub, and we have no NSSA, and we have no totally, or I can't remember. I always confuse the NSSA when we get to is it totally not so stubby area? Is it not so totally stubby area? So again, the NSSA and the totally NSSA, right? We don't have any of these special areas. So this type 5 in this context here, where I'm just talking multi-area OSPF with no stubs, no totally stub, no NSSAs, no totally NSSAs, he has domain-wide scope, which means he is going to find his way into every area inside the OSPF domain. So, for example, if I came over here to router 2 right now and went from user exec to privilege exec, and if I were to say show IP OSPF database, do we have a type 5 here? We absolutely do. Here it is right there. So not only does it go into the backbone area, he goes into the member areas, right? Because we're talking about area 1 here. That's where router 2 lives, is in area 1. But he gets this domain-wide type 5 LSA from the advertising router, which was 3.3.3.3. Remember, way down here at the bottom with the external source. But now I need to perform recursion in the OSPF graph to the node who knows about 3.3.3.3. And who is that router? It's 1.1.1.1 or router 1. So now I take a look. I say I want to get to 10.0.0.0. That's the advertising router. Do I have a summary type 4 LSA who can get me to this ASBR? I do. And it tells me you need to go to router 1. Then I do another recursion. Do I have a type 1 to get to router 1? I do. It's right here. The type 1 LSA, the router LSA. And I know that router 1 is in my area, and then I look into the routing table and say, how do I get to router 1's interface. And so again, if I were to say, and we haven't gotten here yet, but show IP OSPF database router, this will show me all of the LSA detailed information that OSPF is using to get to router 1. So again, remember, this is router 2. So here are my router LSA. So the link state ID of 1.1.1.1 says the advertising router is 1.1.1.1, right? The routing bit is set, and that is a critical field, because if that is not there, this will not, the route to router 1 will not get installed into the routing table. So if I clear the screen here and we work our way down a little further, you can see that when we get down to the link state age, we also come down link connected to a stub network. So that's for the stub, right? And here's the router LSA showing me that here is the link data for the interface address 172.16.12.2. Here's the link data 172.16.12.1. If we come back to the diagram, what are we talking about there? That network right there, and that is the 172.16.1, and here is my 172.16.2. So when we look at the details of the actual LSA, what do we see, right? Here is the router LSA for router 2, or I'm sorry, this is the router LSA that was generated by router 1, the link state ID 1111, right? Here is that router information interface. And so this is how OSPF recurses to figure out, do I know how to get to router 1? I do. The information is right here. There's the IP information. So now 172.16.1.2 show IP route. Where is my interface to that network? It is directly connected. Out serial 000. And so this is how OSPF leverages the link state database by finding the nodes in the graph who own the information to actually get to the route. But again, it's not looking at it as, oh, hey, how do I get to this route? It's, how do I get to the node in my OSPF shortest path tree graph who can get me to that network, right? So let's go ahead and we'll scroll down, and good. Okay, they did do a show IP OSPF database router, which we took a look at there. And they wanted us to do that on a router 4. So I'll come back here to router 4. We'll do the same thing. Show IP OSPF database router. And so there it is. Again, same information, right? Just from a different perspective. So this is from router 4's perspective. And we see much the same information, right? So, and you can do this. If I say show IP OSPF, database, and I do a question mark, we can take a look at the network LSA. So that's the information for the network LSA. What if I wanted to see the summary for the type 3s? Well, here's my information for the summaries. And you can see it gives us the metric information as well for those summaries. I can say ASBR summary. And there's the type 4 LSA for the summary to get to, and let's take a look here, right? Remember we said, who's the ASBR? Well, it's router 3. He's over in another area, and router 4 says, you know what? The advertising router is 1.1.1.1. So this is how router 4 would do the recursion. He says, hey, I need to get to that 10.0.0.0 network. Who is the link state ID owner of that? Well, who's the originator? Well, it's router 3, 3.3.3.3. How did router 4 learn about that? I learned about it from router 1. So now if router 4 says, all right, well, how would I get to, do I have a type 1 LSA to get to 4.4.4.4? I do. And here it is right here. Link state ID for my type 1 LSA. The advertising router is router 4. So where am I going to go? Whoops, sorry. The link data, 172.16.14.2. And then I go into the routing table, I figure out how I get there, and that is how OSPF is doing things behind the scenes. All right, so we took a look at the type 1s, we took a look at the type 2s, we took a look at the type 3s and the 4s. So again, if I were to come back and say external, right, so show me the LSA information for the external route, I can see the routing bit is set, which tells me it's going to be in my routing table, right? Here is the link state ID. We've got that network for the external network number. That is a link state ID for a type 5 LSA. Who's the advertising router? Well, that's my ASBR, right? Router 3. Now, when we come down here, we can see some important information. We get the network mask. The metric type is 2. By default, externals will be type 2. We get the metric information here, which when you get into more advanced CCIE topics, we are very interested in the forwarding metric. And then you have the forward address. When the forwarding address is 0000, that means we are sending it to the advertising router, right? Which is router 3. This address can be different. In some cases, you could end up with an address that sends you to another router other than router 3. And that's going to get into more advanced scenarios where you've got multiple ABRs who are flooding that information into an area, and that's where the forwarding address could end up being different. So for now, just kind of put that in the back of your mind that forwarding address could be different, right? However, in the scenario that we have here, we're taking a look at this from just the perspective of router 4, what he sees, and he says, you know what, that is the advertising router. I need to recurse to that router, which is going to be the ASBR. So then I look into my link state database and I say, how do I get to 3.3.3.3? Where did I learn about that? Well, the summary ASBR, right? The summary ASBR link, the type 4 LSA, that was flooded in here by router 1. So that's where I'm going to go to get to the ASBR. And again, it's that same drawing that we see, whoops, I'm sorry, same diagram that we see here, right? Here is the ASBR. Router 4 way over here says, hey, I want to get to 10.0.0.0, and I know that it was originated from 3.3.3.3, but I don't have 3.3.3.3 in here, do I? But what I have is a type 4 LSA that is describing to me how do I get to 3.3.3.3. And what does that type 4 LSA say? It says, hey, come on over here to 1.1.1.1, and I will get you eventually to the ASBR 3.3.3.3, who is router 3. Again, this is a great, nice, inductive approach, simple approach to building on how we decipher what's in that OSPF Link State Database. All right, so we took a look at that. We took a look at the other areas. And again, good drawing, beautiful drawing here, right? So type 2 LSA, how does that work? Well, the type 2 is a network LSA. It's originated by the DR. It's going to hit the ABR, and then it's going to show up here in the backbone area as a type 3. And so if we had another area over here, right? Let's say we had another ABR. Whoops, sorry about that. Uh-oh. I think Desk Scribble is, it's going to cash out on us here. I'm going to have to restart it. So, but if we had this other area over here, let's say it was area 51, the ABR, and there it goes. So Desk Scribble is down. Let's bring him back to life here. And I'm going to adjust the thickness here. Let's do that. So if we had another ABR right there, and then he was in area 51 as well, the question is, this type 2 LSA, which worked its way into here as a type 3 summary, how does it get over here to area, and that is a terrible 51, area 51. How does he get over here? Well, this ABR here will regenerate and flood that type 3 into that area. And that's how that type 3 is going to make his way into other areas. Whoops, that is not what I wanted to do there. He's going to make his way into other areas. All right, we already took a look at the IP OSPF database. Again, we took a look at the network LSAs, right? It's going to show us the designated router address. And so here is again, another great example of, we've got our type 1s and 2s. They hit the ABR at the backbone area. They come in as 3s, and this is what we just drew. They're regenerated and flooded into other areas. So again, if there was another ABR here who came out to area 51, this would also flood this way, right? And this is how OSPF keeps the Link State Database 100% up to date throughout the entire, not just the areas, but also making sure that the information that's needed is flooded into the other areas. All right, we took a look at the summaries already. Now the type 4, right? Because this is one of the more confusing LSA types. So remember, we looked over here, right? So here is my ASBR, okay? So the ASBR, he ends up with an external route. External routing information gets sent in. So he sends that in as a type 1 with the external bit. The E bit gets set on that type 1 that comes in from the ASBR. And it's from that E bit that everyone in here says, yep, that is a type 5. Okay? So it hits the ABR as a type 1 with the E bit set, telling it, hey, that's an external type 5. We then have, or I'm sorry, we're not talking about the route here. It looks like it's talking about the ASBR. So again, the type 4 LSA that comes in is describing the ASBR, right? We're not talking about the route, talking about the ASBR. Comes in as a type 4, and that will also get flooded out through area border routers as type 4 LSA information. Because again, the ASBR identifies himself with a type 1. He generates a router LSA, a type 1 LSA. It just has the external bit set. So again, the routing information that comes in as a type 5 external, right? And that also gets sent through all of the areas in the domain, because type 5s have domain-wide scope. All right? So we'll clear the screen there. And that is how we identify the ASBR, is he generates a type 1, right? So router 3 is generating a type 1 router LSA in area 2. It just has the E bit, or the external bit, set. And we looked at that ASBR summary. And then again, so here we go with the type 5 LSA. And I apologize, when I started up here, I was thinking of it from the type 5 perspective, but they're describing the ASBR. So here is the type 5. What I want to do is, if I come into, I believe it's router 1. Let's take a look at router 1 here. If we go from user exec to privilege exec, if I say show IP OSPF interface detail, or is it neighbor detail? There we go. All right, so remember when we looked at router 3, right? We looked at the neighbor router 3 here. Oops, and this is what we're interested in the output here. Because remember, router 3 is an ASBR, right? And, excuse me, and we can see here, and maybe it's not in here that I'm looking for that output. Neighbor priority is 1. Not interested in that. Yeah, so the E bit is in the hello. But I'm looking for something else that I don't see here. Let me clear this. And show IP OSPF database router. And I'm looking for So here we go. Yeah, and I don't see it. I'm looking for, I can't remember. There's a command specifically to show me the ASBR status, and the EBIT is specifically, it said it was set on the other, but that's not what I was looking for. It's something different. I'm drawing a blank here. So yeah, you can see that we've got the link state ID, the advertising router, and let me clear the screen and say show IP, whoops. Show IP OSPF. And am I doing it from the wrong perspective here? Hold on. That could be it. Show IP OSPF. There we go. I was doing it from the wrong perspective. So when I do the show IP OSPF, what I'm looking for is it'll tell me, and I'm looking for where it says, it should say this router is an ASBR or an ABR, and let's go ahead and power that off. Drop that down. Sorry, that just popped up out of the blue there. So I'm going to come back over router 3. And where is it at here? Redistributing external routes from static. But it should tell me, and I could be looking right by it. Or maybe it's just show IP. I apologize, I'm drawing a blank here. I'm looking for some specific output. Show IP protocols. No, it's not that. It's definitely show IP OSPF. And let me include area. No, border, include border. Show IP OSPF. Yeah, typically it'll tell you, it'll say this router is an ABR, this router is both an ABR and an ASBR. And I don't see that here, which is typically something we should see. All right, so we'll go ahead and move by this, and we might see this in one of the labs. I'm not sure why it's not showing it, but it should show it as an ABR, or maybe that's it. Did I do ABR? Am I just missing it here? Yeah, it's not in there. It should show that that is an ABR. So we'll come back to that. So here on the OSPF type 5, right, the LSA comes in as a type 5. It hits the ABR as a type 5, and it's going to be flooded everywhere as a type 5. So the way to think of it is that the type 4 LSA is going to tell me how to get to the source of the type 5 LSA. So the type 4 is just kind of like an additional road sign that's going to pop up and say, hey, if you're trying to get to this type 5, this is how you want to get there, because this is the type 4 LSA for the ASBR. All right, and we took a look at the external. All right, so that's pretty much it. I mean, we took a look at pretty much everything here with respect to the OSPF database. Again, some really nice drawings and phenomenal activities to acclimate you to the OSPF database. All right, so this has been Discovery Activity 10, Building the Link State Database, and I will see you all Monday night.